Without further ado, let's go to Stewart Jackson, founder, director and strategic counsel at Political Insight, former advisor, of course, to David Davis. Stewart, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Let's kick off with the good news. Nissan, the naysayers who told us, oh, look what's going to happen. All the car manufacturers are going to move out of England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, and we're going to have no business, and there's going to be terrible, terrible, awful trouble economically. Doesn't turn out quite to be like that.
No, and I think one of the depressing things, unedifying things that we saw a few weeks ago is some of the sort of hardcore Remainers on social media exulting at the idea that these so-called stupid gammons in Sunderland who work for Nissan were going to lose their jobs and their livelihood and voted for their families.
And they'd voted for their own demise, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the fact is that I always said that big business, including car makers, would have prepared for all eventualities, and that the backstop for them was always that a deal was better than no deal, and they would make it work. And Nissan have not just said they're going to keep the plant open; they're effectively saying it's going to be the exemplar, the template manufacturing plant for the whole of Europe. And I think that is a big vote of confidence for global Britain post-Brexit.
I think it absolutely is. And also just in general, Stuart, we're now sort of, 3 weeks into January, 3 weeks into completely having left the European Union. And, aside from one or two little, what you might describe as kind of bumps in the road, it's all going pretty well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. We've got a situation where the media, parts of the media, in fairness, are looking to basically play up any disruption at the border, any issues such as, the lorry drivers having a ham sandwich in their cab being taken by the Dutch customs officials. I mean, if that's the worst that's happening, it's not that bad. I think, as I said, business will have already planned, big logistics businesses will have already planned some of these changes many months ago. I think the government is stepping up to assist in terms of information and advice to businesses and the trade organisations. But of course, there will be some friction at the border. It was always going to be the case if you left the customs union and single market and left the bailiwick of the European Court of Justice. A situation we've had for 45 years is changing. You are going to have a degree of disruption.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, Daniel Hannan was saying that to Julie Hartley-Brewer just a moment ago. You move house, things go wrong that you have to fix, but it doesn't mean you don't move house. It doesn't mean that you actually stop everything in order to fix something that's gone slightly all right. I mean, the story on the front page of the Times this morning about people paying extra VAT on goods coming in from European websites, effectively, is clearly a combination of European companies not being up to speed with what they're supposed to be doing, and also courier companies, rather, I would say, taking advantage.
Yeah, and I think the market will drive where those people buy those goods again. And for all these people, both in the UK and the European Union, who are saying it's too difficult, there's too much administration, it's too complex for us to continue dealing. Frankly, the market says if there is an opportunity to make money by selling a product, then if it's in Europe now, people in the UK will do it and vice versa. There will not be a gap in the market for very long. And I think on that basis, there might be a price spike in the very short term, but I think it'll even out over the course of 2 or 3 years as we get used to the procedures. Remember, we're not talking about guys in peak caps, barriers, saying, oh, your paperwork's not in order, go away. A lot of this now is in advance, using digital technology, and it will take a bit of time to bed in. But I think in the long term, those friction costs at the border will be dissipated and the UK will prosper.
And as far as the fishing situation is concerned, Stuart, which seems to be another one that people, shall we say, on the rejoin side are picking up on. There was a demo in London the other day with a lot of trucks from various points around the country. But an awful lot of those companies apparently were not actually dealing in getting fish out of the sea. They were more about, moving fish around the country once somebody else had done that.
Well, I'm touched by the deep interest and concern of people like AC Grayling and Alistair Campbell and their long and proud history of sticking up for fishermen. If you remember, Bob Geldof stuck two fingers up to the fishermen on the Thames. I saw it for myself. I was on the terrace of the House of Commons. It was disgraceful.
Right.
And now they're experts on all things pescatorian. Frankly, it's ridiculous. The fact is, the political reality was that fishing is a tiny proportion of GDP. It was never going to be the case that we were going to crash a multi-billion euro deal, a trade deal over many years on the basis of that. I don't think it's the best deal for fishermen, but I think it's probably the best that could be achieved at that stage. And at the end of the day, they will be able to build up their capacity, their jobs will be secured, and fishing and fish processing will be again a viable industry. But we can't go back in time. We're not 1973, and things have moved on.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, after 40 years of running the business down and running the industry effectively out of the country and handing it all over to European fishing fleets, you can't hardly expect us to suddenly start ramping up immediately the numbers of trawlers that we can put into the water. But clearly the deal over the course of 5 years will allow time for that to happen, right?
But also, you're absolutely right, Mike, but the other thing people forget is that British people have a very definite taste in what fish they want to eat. And it's different to what European folk want to eat. So it's pointless to catch stuff to try and land it in the UK, to catch fish in the UK, in UK ports, to try and sell it to the British public who don't want it, when continental fishermen can catch that fish and put it to market in the European Union. I just think we have to be pragmatic and sensible about this. There will be an increase in the market. There will be more investment. We are an independent maritime nation again, and it is ultimately for us to decide who fishes in our waters. But we've also got to understand the realpolitik of it. And, it was not wise to put everything on fishing and crash the deal on that basis.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Let's move to what's going on in Downing Street. I mean, obviously what happened in the last month has been very, very difficult for Boris Johnson in terms of this new COVID variant that suddenly popped up on the 18th of December. People, I think, in this country are being reasonably kind of tolerant, I think, through this, incredibly tolerant, actually, of the lockdown, because it looks as though we ain't going to come out of it anytime soon. But I've been asking all week, and certainly a lot of Tory backbench MPs now are joining the need for us to get a roadmap of some kind out of here. In terms of working out at what point we set a target for businesses to reopen and for schools to go back.
Yeah, and Mark Harper, who is a very experienced Member of Parliament, former Chief Whip, leading the COVID recovery group, has made that point consistently since before Christmas, that Boris's raison d'etre, frankly, is sunlit uplands, being positive, being forward-looking and optimistic. And I think that's what he's got to be. He's got to give people hope. And let's be honest, vaccinating 5 million people in 2 or 3 weeks, probably a little over 3 weeks, is a fantastic achievement, the fourth best in the world. Let's see people quoting that when they go on to constantly quote about our fatality figures and don't look at the other side of the coin. Of course, it's tragic people have died, but it's also amazing that we've got so much capacity in vaccine. British expertise and knowledge has brought forward those vaccines, and our armed forces and others in the NHS have vaccinated that many people. In fact, 500,000 people have had 2 vaccines. So I think that's on the positive side. But you're right, we do need a proper strategy. We don't need gimmicks like £500 just for sitting at home. I understand what the position is, because you look at the pictures of people crowding onto the tube trains, and of course you get a knee-jerk reaction from Sadiq Khan as ever, a gimmick. But there is a concern about that. But I do think there needs to be a sector-by-sector analysis and proper strategic plan of leaving lockdown and the impact that's going to have on the economy. And I think that's what Downing Street need to be thinking about now to keep its backbenchers on board.
I think that's right. And if there are people crowding onto trains, that's because they need to go to work, Stuart, as well. Because don't forget, there's a huge swathe of people, millions of people, who've received absolutely nothing from this government because they're self-employed, because they work in the gig economy, because they haven't been able to provide enough, paperwork to support whatever their claim would be. I mean, I'd rather see them getting money before they start handing out 500 quid for a positive test.
I agree. And, one of my friends said to me this week that he'd heard rumours that they were trying to close down every building site in London because too many people were coming in between 6 and 8 in the morning. Well, this time of the year, construction workers cannot be on construction sites in the darkness with 100% safety. There are going to be accidents. So, of course, people have to travel very early to get the light as soon as they can and work through the day. If you close down the construction industry in Greater London, you're going to have a big hit for the economy. And I just think people have got to be sensible and not abuse the tolerance and understanding of the British public. People need to see a way out and they need to make money. And if you only earn money if you turn up for work, you are going to be struggling now. Not just financially, you're going to be struggling with depression and anxiety and worries about looking after your kids and your long-term future. And that's why the banks need to think about the way they're treating people. The insurance companies, I'm glad they got one in the eye the other day and they had to pay out because that would have been a disgrace. We've all got to pull together to try and help each other on this occasion because it will end. Vaccine is the light at the end of the tunnel. But as they say, it's darkest before the dawn, and now it feels pretty dark.
Well, it does, Stuart. And I mean, you talk to people in the Conservative Party and in government. I mean, do they? Because the sense that a lot of people have, particularly those working in businesses that really are struggling, people working in hospitality and other areas that need to be up and running, gyms, for example, and that kind of thing. There's a sense from a lot of those people that the government isn't taking their pain into consideration, that their only focus is COVID and trying to stop the rate of infections, which seems pretty impossible as a task in general. But there's a sense that there's no one actually sort of speaking up for them in the room, if you know what I mean, that the collateral damage of this is really, really damaging.
Yeah, I think so. But then again, this is completely unexpected, unprecedented. I think infections are now falling, so hospital admissions will fall, but there's a lag of about 2 weeks, I think. So in 2 weeks' time, God willing, we will see fewer beds occupied in ICUs, fewer ventilators, fewer people presenting at hospital with symptoms of COVID, but it will take time. I do agree with you. I think on an individual basis, members of Parliament are representing the most vulnerable people, not just in terms of health, but in terms of the economy and financial viability. But we just have to accept that there will be some difficult decisions that the Chancellor's had to take. I mean, I'm self-employed. I haven't had any help at all thus far. And it's been, tough. And I'm lucky. I'm fortunate in my circumstances. I can probably get through it. But I do think that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I have to say I'm less persuaded by people like Sting and Elton John writing, asking for taxpayer handouts, as if they'd never toured anywhere apart from the European Union.
Right.
They never needed to get visas in Brazil, South Africa, Canada, United States. I mean, there is a certain lack of empathy on my part for those guys. I can understand live music's important, but there are, in my opinion, bigger priorities.
Well, they really are. Absolutely right. Stuart, great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Stewart Jackson, founder, director of Strategic Council at Political Insight, former Conservative MP, of course, former special advisor to David Davis. Let's talk a bit about how Brexit is going, because if you've got a problem with what you think is going on, I'd love to hear what it is. 0344 499 1000. We hear all the time from the SNP up in Scotland that they have been taken out of the European Union against their will, which of course is absolute utter nonsense, because that is not the case for an awful lot of people in Scotland who actually voted for Brexit, for heaven's sake. 0344 499 1000.